So I don't know if you probably don't remember because you've done so many conferences and discussions, but I attended you were part of the Fit to Fight Fire Firefighter Resiliency at the Mile High Conference,
Yes.
probably 3 years ago now, something like that.
More than that. 4.
4 years ago,
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
Your hair was a lot darker then.
Yeah, for sure it was. And just attending your class, it honestly blew me away, not just with the material that you were presenting, but you made it compelling. And I think you made it compelling because of how honest and forthright you were with your story. And so that helped a lot because I feel like at that point in my life I was barely at like the tip of this iceberg of how to become a resilient firefighter. I was kind of messing around with stuff like training in my gear, adding stress factors, applying that to academy settings, seeing how people do, and then adding like radio traffic and other crews and seeing how those stress factors affect things. Then when I went to your class, it was like, oh wow, this guy has this whole global approach to making us better. And the honesty that you had with the backstory on how you came to be where you are now
Yeah.
just made it so much worthwhile. So I came back over here ranting and raving about this class. And so it's so nice to see later on in the future that now you're here and you're able to help out the whole department, not just this one individual. So thank you for that.
Nah, listen, it never ceases to amaze me how God works in my life. He just opens doors and things happen. And I started the same way that you were talking about, fooling around with certain things. But it was out of necessity. It wasn't because, I didn't have the same vision that you had. Mine was, I got to get well because this is the only thing I know. This is my career. And I couldn't keep a mask on my face. And it was just, man, it was a really emasculating place. It really was. And so there was a lot of people that helped me to get past that point. And it's just been an incredible journey. A lot of people get a little put off sometimes when I talk to them about God, but I'm a smart dude. I am. I'm an intelligent guy, but I'm
Yes.
not that intelligent. I mean, it's just from Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman to, I could name names, but the performance director for Red Bull, the head commander and in charge of the psychology for the United States Navy SEALs Buds program. I've got Navy SEALs from the odd and even teams. I've got Army Rangers. I've got paratroopers, all kinds of people, military and sporting, and there wasn't many in the fire or law enforcement arena at the time that helped me get through.
Yes.
And it was a matter of survival, is what it was. For me, it was a survival thing.
So touching on that with, you mentioned, I would assume the book On Combat, correct?
Yes.
That mainly delves into really police and combat soldiers and how they were reacting towards stress, and really finding that there was a very predictable response that could happen if you're not exposed to those stressors before.
That is correct.
And kind of like you, it blew my mind on how there's information like that out there, but yet we as a fire service aren't applying that to our job, to where somehow that our job is different than that. And I think we even have a better advantage because we're able to train for the situation before it happens. Granted, there's some weird things that we'll show up to that we're not ready for, but for the most part, we're not these soldiers that are going out and getting a raid or an IED that's hitting
That's
us,
right.
and all of a sudden we're exposed to this stress. Like we're able to read the notes on our call and know what we're going into, or at least have a good idea. And I feel like we're shortchanging ourselves to not apply some of that research to our job.
I would agree with you. I think we've come a long way, though. Just in the 4 years that I've met you, have you noticed how many people are involved in doing this kind of thing now?
Oh yeah, yep.
It has grown incrementally. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a small army of people just to get this movement, to keep it going. I'm excited when I'm already old, but when it's time to turn the page and get away from all this, I'll be watching from a distance, and I'll be excited to see where you guys take this.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's
Excited
cool.
to see where we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so jumping in here, I got some questions and some notes that I wrote down. So you got 29 years in the fire service.
That's correct.
24 for Palm Beach County.
That's correct.
So just what you mentioned right now, you having trouble keeping your mask on, was that deeper into your career? Was it something that you always had going on, or was it something that you started kind of feeling like a whispering?
That's
happening?
a great question, because it started in the Recruit Academy. When we started, it was the old MSAs, and the windows on them were really small to be able to view out of. It had what we call the elephant trunk, this big corrugated piece of plastic tubing, and you had to learn how to breathe through that. So when they gave it to me in the academy, I'd never had anything like that in my face. And we put that on, my eyes got big as saucers, and I started thinking to myself, oh crap, this is scary. And I wouldn't admit it to anybody, and I just kept telling myself, just don't rip it off. Don't, because you don't want to be that guy, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's the way I talked to myself. But I was, I think I was around 30 years old at the time. And it was hard, man. It was hard. So what I did was I found a buddy of mine that worked for a department that had those, and he checked out a mask and he let me train with it for a month. So I'd be out in my yard mowing the lawn, this freaking thing hanging off my face. You know, I walk around the house. I had a dog. I had a beautiful pit that I had raised from a puppy. His name was Taz, and the dog would attack me with this mask on, you know, and I wouldn't think anything about it because I was trying to get acclimated to wearing this mask. Yeah. I mean, I drove my car with it on. I stuck the tube out the window, and I closed the window on so it'd give me fresh air, and I drove my car with this thing. You do that now, you get arrested, you know. But I was doing whatever I could to get acclimated to something that really, really frightened me, and I wasn't even aware of what I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, just exposure therapy. Yep. You just continue to repeat to do something, which is what we do with fire training. Fast forward, man, I was on the job, I think, 13 years. I had been in another department 3 years prior to that, 4 years prior to that. And I was going through a divorce. And, you know, the divorce, it's not that it was more traumatic than anybody else's divorce, it just happened to be the vehicle. It was the event. I didn't understand the significance of that event until later on, but I thought I was losing my mind. I couldn't sleep. That's how it started. My sleep patterns were interrupted, and then I noticed my breathing was off, and I just attributed, I had walking pneumonia about a month prior to that. And I had to move out of my house, and I couldn't see my kids. There was a lot of upheaval in my life, and so I'm paying a mortgage on a house that I can't even go see, and I'm paying rent, I'm paying 2 grocery bills, I'm paying for, divorce is funny in the sense that, and I'm not putting women down in any way, I can only speak about my experience. Everything went in her favor, so I felt like, what did I do wrong? And then all this other stuff was going on. I just thought I was losing my mind. I couldn't sleep, and then I couldn't lay down, put a sheet over my face, and then eventually it got to the point where I couldn't keep a mask on my face. I mean, we're just doing fit testing, and I kept telling myself the same thing that I told myself in the fire academy: just don't take your mask off. Just don't take your mask off. And that's when I ran across Grossman's book.
Wow.
It was at there's a guy, his name's Paulie Capo. I think he's a training chief somewhere in Colorado. I want to say the Denver area, I'm not sure. And he was on the West Coast in Florida, and he was doing a RIT seminar for us. And we got to talking afterwards. He told me, you should read this book. And it was on combat. And when I read it, and I saw the brain changes, because they did that fMRIs.
There you go. Yep.
And when they did the fMRIs, and I saw the brain changes, something about it made sense. You ever hear something and it just resonates because it's truthful?
Yeah.
And so I started pursuing it, and I started practicing his thing, and it worked. It worked, and that was when I felt hopeful. It wasn't until that point that I realized how hopeless I had been feeling.
So were you taking points from that book and using practical application towards it? Like,
That's exactly what I was doing.
nice. Okay.
I was taking points from there. So the breathing, it later came into play. So I'll just explain it. So the breathing was a big component, and he talked about doing diaphragmatic breathing, okay, which is belly breathing, and taking full breaths, and finding a rhythm and staying that way. And I started doing that, and I was practicing on a treadmill. So it's a long story. And there was, I had all my gear on, and I had a high-rise pack over my bottle. I was on air. I had the irons, one in each hand. I had the treadmill on an incline. I was just hustling.
Yeah.
And when it closed on me so fast, it being the anxiety. It was like somebody picking me up by my head and dipping me in a warm pool of water. You could feel it coming over you, and it would get, once it gets to your thorax, it just felt like it was smothering me. I was suffocating. And when that happened, my eyes got big, just like it did in the very beginning. I threw the irons down. Thank God we had rubber mats on the ground, I shrugged off the high-rise pack. I jumped off the treadmill, and I walked outside. And I was walking around, and all I could do was tell myself, don't take your mask off, don't take... I didn't even have time to breathe. That's how quickly it closed on me. So there was no rational thought until I walked out into the sun, because it was August in South Florida. And if you're wondering what that's like, just get on I-95 and travel south until you see some guy standing on an exit with a pitchfork, because you're going to hell. It's hot. It's hot.
Yeah.
It's miserable. And I felt the heat right away, and that was my first rational thought was, what the hell are you doing? It's hot out here. Go back inside in the air conditioning. So I went back inside, and I was feeling a little dejected because I missed the opportunity. And then it dawned on me, hey, I could do this again. I got plenty of air. We're good. So I got everything back on. I got back on the treadmill. And the windows, there's a slight window. It's a very narrow window that goes into the doors that we have in our rooms, the bunk room, the gym, and everything. I was in the gym at the firehouse, and I see like 3 sets of eyes looking at me, right? I know these guys are, and I'm like, whatever, I'm focused. I'm going to do this. I get back on there with all that, and I'm watching, and I happen to see the time, and it was somewhere around 5 minutes, 30 seconds, but this time I just kept my eyes on the clock, and like, man, it was almost like right around 5 minutes, 20, 25 seconds, I felt it coming again. And I remembered the word ambivalent. Do not be ambivalent when it comes to your breathing. Don't put it off. React immediately. And based off of how quickly it closed on me last time, I was like, I'm not taking any chances. And I straddled the sides of I started breathing, sides of the treadmill, and I started breathing. And I was hustling, so I was breathing through my mouth. I didn't understand the significance of breathing, the difference between breathing through my nose and my mouth at the time. And I was breathing through my mouth, and I caught my breath, and it seemed longer, but in reality, it probably took about 7 seconds and it went away. And that was a win. That was a win. I hadn't had that win in a very, very long time. It was a big win. So for the following 8 months, I had to consciously breathe, which means I had to be aware of every situation. Every time I put gear on, I was like, you better be spot on with your breathing, bro. Because if you're not, you don't want to rip your mask off, And I had to be consciously aware of it until it got to the point that I was unconsciously doing it.
Yeah.
And it took somewhere around 8 months to a year, but it changed.
That's so much deeper than, so that reminds me of almost every academy setting that you see, or any even training setting, when you see people that are struggling through the scenario, you'll hear a lot of the proctors say like, breathe, or listen to your breathing, and it's very easy for a proctor to tell what's going on because of our packs. You can hear the air that's going in and out, and we're trying to cue them all of the things that you just said right there, but we don't have the depth that you have in experiencing this is why I'm telling you to breathe.
That's right.
When I say breathe, I'm trying to get you to calm down.
That's right.
But I don't have the why yet on explaining.
That's
This
right.
is 7 seconds of controlling yourself with some good belly breathing can help turn you around 180 from everything, all the stressors in your life that are now compounding in this one scenario right here with breathe.
You'd mentioned before that the fire service doesn't seem to be taking advantage of this info. And this is one of the reasons why. The proctor is looking at the student as though he's physically exhausted, and the breathing is representative of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The student is not physically exhausted. He's a freaking kid, man. The guy got gas to last forever.
Yes.
He's gonna run, you know?
Yep.
He is emotionally taxed. He's scared. He's struggling when you hear breathing like that. So there's a difference. When the emotion is involved, it changes everything. Intensity goes up, everything goes up. With the exception of the ability for rational thinking, it starts to decrease. And the stronger and more intense the emotion is, the more in the shitter the rational thinking, critical thinking, decision making, situational awareness, peripheral vision, auditory exclusion, all of that stuff goes down way low. And you slip into, a lot of people know it as fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system, and that is a survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different type of survival mechanism than what we are trying to do within a fire. We're not trying to survive, we're trying to function and be efficient and effective in a fire. And when that kicks in, that survival mode is, I got a mask and a pack restraining me and this jacket with these clown gloves, and we start taking stuff off. And there's plenty of video out there to document it. There's over 800 NIOSH reports that I had in a 15-year period. I got to read 80 of them and got physically sick reading these things. The guy's name, Mark, his name will come to me. Mark, anyways, he was with the USFA, and those guys gave me all the document that I needed, all the documents that I needed, because they're when you go to the United States Fire admin, when you go into their website and try to look up stuff, it's not user friendly. So this guy found all this stuff for me, and God, I still haven't remembered his name. Towards the end, it'll pop up out of nowhere, and I'll say his name, Mark something. And he got that documentation to me and sent it to me, and then I had to reformat it because it came in some express. It was weird, the spreadsheet that it came in. But I read them because they were all links to all the reports. And I mean, I had file cabinets full of research. I wanted to know more about what this was. Mm-hmm. Because during that period of time, I don't throw the word hopeless around like, oh, I just felt really bad. No. When you tell somebody the hopeless state was to the point where I got familiar with the taste of gun oil, it was suicide ideation, the whole 9 yards. And it wasn't just because I couldn't keep a mask on. Right. All of these were symptoms of post-traumatic stress. I had no idea what it was. I just thought I was losing my mind. So when I got that win, that was awesome. But I still couldn't sleep at night. I would wake up from sleep, and that was just a whole nother story. But the application of what you were talking about has been lost because neuroscience is just coming around to be able to explain these things. And a guy like Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman was on the cutting edge of that, and he was able to see that. And there were some things that I added to his program too. So I picked and choose from all these different people.
Right.
And I created something that helped me, and in turn, turned into a class. I never once intended to, do what I'm doing now.
It definitely seems like the track of your life, like you said, happened very organically. It wasn't something that was forced. It sort of showed up at the time that you needed it. And I think because of your natural curiosity and tenacity, you kept picking at it to figure out what is this that's helping me.
Yeah.
On that,
drives my wife absolutely
yeah, I was gonna
crazy.
say, do you feel like you are an outlier when it comes to? So you mentioned like the divorce was your vehicle that kind of pushed you down this dangerous path.
Yes.
But you definitely leaned into that and kind of forced yourself into more anxiety, to whether you willingly did it or not. There was something about you that got yourself on that treadmill with all the gear on.
Yes.
Do you think that makes you a little bit of an outlier? Because I feel like there are definitely times that I've experienced where if I'm doing that sort of thing on a treadmill and you have the eyes looking at you like, what is this crazy guy doing? But I think there's something to that where it's like you're leaning into the ugly and this darkness to try and figure out how to thrive in that situation. Is that something that you can, and I think you're trying to do this with your classes, is this something that you can do universally with everyone in the department? Or are there just certain outliers that will strive in these situations?
That's a really great question. I want to remind me if I forget to come back to that question, but I want to finish the story on the
Yes,
air
yes.
pack because you
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
reminded me. So the ending of that story is later that evening, after I'm done, I've successfully accomplished this multiple times, right? And my bottles bled all the way down, and I racked it and reset everything. I took a shower. We were getting ready for dinner, and over the PA system in the firehouse, Ricky, come to my quarters. I'm like, okay. So I'm walking into the captain's quarters, and everybody's like, "What'd you do?" I don't know. I don't think I did anything, you know. But immediately, everybody goes to, "Ooh, you screwed up. The captain's calling you into his office."
Yeah.
I was a senior man. So I go walking in, and I say, "What's up, boss?" He said, "Close the door." I'm like, this is not good. He goes, "Listen, I just want to let you know how proud I am of you." I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, while you're in there training, 36 came by here, and we're all sitting down. They got 2 rookies on there. One of them's riding, one of them's on shift, and then we've got 2 rookies on our shift too. So we got 4 rookies sitting at the table. And the captain points out, he says, 'Why is the senior man in this house in there training and busting his ass while the rookies are sitting at the table with everybody else?'" And he looked around, he looked at him, and he said, I told him, I said, "Because Ricky's an overachiever, and we just finished training, and he's in there doing that, on top of that." So I didn't have the heart to tell him until years later, after I
Yeah.
got squared away. I said, "Hey, you remember that night where you thanked me about training and all that?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I was just trying to keep a mask on my face. I was trying not to blow my brains out, and I went back and I reviewed everything." He's like, "Why didn't you come and tell me?" I said, "Because I was ashamed."
Yeah. But even
That's just such a dark place that I don't,
absolutely.
and that is what, with regards to the outlier, that has happened multiple times in my life. It happened with drugs and alcohol. I've been sober 34 years, and which is really hard to get into the fire service when you don't drink, because they don't trust you for a long time.
Right.
If you're not going out drinking with them, they don't trust you. They don't understand. If I go out drinking with them, I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to end up in handcuffs. I'm going to lose my career, and then I'm off to the races. But so the drugs and the alcohol was one time that happened. There are other things that have happened in my past that I had to try to overcome. There's always been something that I've tried to overcome in my life. I was bullied as a kid, and eventually I got so good at fighting I became a bully. The very thing I despised, I became. I learned lessons in that. And then when I got sober, I learned about infidelity and cheating and why do I do that, And not only that, there's just the dishonesty goes across the board,
Yeah.
which in turn affects your character. In a 12-step program, they do things there's 12 steps, and those are about developing character, and that character is what's important, because there are principles, the foundation of character, that defines who you are. It's not this career, Character is the foundation of leadership. You can't lead if you don't have character. You ever hear the moral character thing? That's just doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And it's very difficult to lead men if you don't have that foundation. And that's why we have a lot of managers, so to speak, because we don't approach that from that direction. So a lot of this stuff was essentially overcoming, and I didn't recognize it this time, but by the time the PTSD diagnosis came, I would be looking up and I go, all right, where are you taking me now? And it opened the door to working with other men, and this class evolved. Same thing happens when I get diagnosed with cancer. Where are you going to take me now?
Yeah.
And start working with guys in the fire service that have had cancer and nobody could speak to. I had a close friend of mine named Mark Weiss. He died this past September, a year ago this past September. And we were at FDIC that year, which was 2020, and we went to a ball game. And we were like, we're going to do this because we got diagnosed at the same time. But he had pancreatic cancer, I had colon cancer.
Okay.
Mine was a surgical cure. His was a miserable death.
Yes.
It was horrible. And we're going to do this every year. You'll be back. We're going to beat this. He never made it back. So you learn these little lessons all the way through. And I know you've got another follow-up question, but the reason that the family thing was such a big deal because that's my foundation. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm safe. That's where I'm comfortable. I had a part in creating these children, and I love them dearly, you know. There was a series of other things that occurred. My daughter was assaulted, and it was just, you know, my ex got triggered by all of this, and that's what caused the divorce. So what I mean by got triggered by all this, here comes the lesson for me. When you don't deal with your past traumas, they will catch up to you. And when they catch up to you, they're going to close on you like a hungry lion. And they did. They devoured her. That woman has not been the same since.
Yep.
You know? And as a result of that, my children suffer because they don't have a mother like they used to have. You know? And growing up with teenagers, and they see their mom a particular way and trying to get them to understand that I don't care what you're thinking right now, you're going to respect her because she's your mother, you know? They didn't get it until much later on in life. You know, life has a way of showing up and humbling all of us. Yeah. And that was the beginning of it all. And so that foundation is critical. Notice from this point forward, whenever a firefighter takes his life or a police officer takes his life, notice how many times it revolves around something to do with the broken loved relationship. A divorce, separation, something like that, the death of a spouse.
Yep.
It's a big motivator.
There's so we recently changed some of our classes, especially those that are looking to take the alternate lieutenant role and eventually promote to lieutenant. And one of those is mental health, so we touch on that. And there's one book that I was exposed to by, I don't know if you know the guy Jordan Peterson, but he talks about, there's this children's book that is titled There's No Such Thing as a Dragon. And it's this little boy that is telling his mom, there's a dragon in my room. And it's this tiny little dragon the size of a cat. And the mom keeps going, there's no dragon. And then it keeps growing throughout the story, and the child keeps trying to tell the mom and point her attention to the dragon. And eventually the dragon becomes so big that it takes the size of the house and walks off with the house, the child, and the mom. And then the father comes home to an empty lot, and he goes and does the right thing, and he seeks out the house, and he ends up finding them on another hill with the dragon now this enormous size. And he's like, what happened? And the child is like, I've been telling you there's this dragon in our house. And it's such an easy child story to read, but it has so much meaning behind it. And so I tell the guys, like, take care of your dragons, because if not, like, you can handle it when it's the size of a kitten, but if you ignore that 5-10 years into your career, this is going to be this enormous fire-breathing dragon that's going to destroy your whole village, everything you know. And so it's one of those where it's like, yeah, life has a way of coming back and humbling you if you don't put yourself in that position to humble yourself. One thing that caught me also was, so character, right? Doing the right thing when no one's looking. I like to take that a step further and think, like, do the right thing when everything has gone wrong. And I think
Man, that is so hard, bro.
Yeah, and I think for you have shown your character over and over to where everything was going wrong for you, and you were still on that treadmill training after you guys had done training. And some of that gave you these huge rewards where it's like, just keep doing the right thing and it'll teach you something eventually. And so that's so huge. That's such a testament to your character. I think that's why
So-
you're in these positions.
This hopefully will resonate with some of the people that watch this. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's very kind of you. But my self-talk was nothing even close to that. You're a piece
Right.
of shit.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna laugh at you. You're a paper champion. You were never any good at this job to begin with. You just floated through. You lucked out. Now that's a lie, you know. And you talk to any of the people that I've worked with in the past, you'll get some mixed reviews. But one was I was never afraid to go ahead and do the job.
Mhm.
I'd be like, raise my hand, send me, bro. I'm in, you know.
Yeah.
And the appearance that we give to people may be inspiring, but the struggle that goes on internally is very, very real. It never goes away. It never goes away. It's always there. It's just waiting. So Grossman categorizes it. He actually identifies it as a puppy, not a dragon.
Oh yeah.
It's a
yeah,
puppy.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Until eventually that puppy turns into this freaking wolf.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where he goes into his story about there's the wolf, there's the sheepdogs, and there's the sheep.
Mm.
You know, and the wolf will kill the sheep. The sheepdog won't kill the sheep, but the sheepdog will kill the wolf. You know, the sheepdog doesn't want to kill the wolf, but if it has to, it will. And that's the way he describes that story. And if you don't handle it while it's a little puppy and you let it grow up, you got a problem on your hands.
Yeah. Such a larger task to deal with.
Yes.
Later on.
Unnecessarily.
Anything you wish you had done differently in your career, looking back on it?
You know, I wrote down that, you know, and it's true. You know, I can, generally, I look back on my career and I can put a smile on my face. I've gotten to do some cool shit in the fire service.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of honor flight.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most amazing experiences the fire service has ever let me to do. As a driver, being in charge of an apparatus and taking care of the equipment, and taking care of the guys that are there, as opposed to taking care of strangers, was another really cool privilege. We've had destitute families that we've actually stepped in as a station and hooked them up and squared them away without getting, you know, everybody else involved. We did that as a station. You know? We worked in our zone is rather eclectic. There's like 13 different gangs there, and you know, shit would burn, and it was insanity. It was a great place to be a fireman, you know. And you know, we go to Publix, and there's those guys that hang out front, you know, and they just sit against the wall, and they're homeless and smoking cigarettes, their butts off the ground, and you get to know some people. And I would go in and buy some sandwiches and then bring them out and hand them to the guys. You know, we did it so often as a company that we got to know what their favorite food was. We offered a ham sandwich to one guy, and the guy's like, I don't eat ham. You're freaking homeless, bro. What are you talking about? You don't eat ham. You should be eating whatever the hell you want. You know, I see you in the back over there dumpster diving, you know. And this kid was just some freaking hot shot X Games kid on a skateboard. And we looked up the video, and this kid was on fire until he started doing drugs. And he went downhill so quick, he can't get off him. He's tried. And I think before I retired, they ended up finding him overdosed and dead. And that was his dead end. And some of these people, man, you know, you get to do some cool stuff. I do have some regrets. I have a couple of them. I actually have two of them. One is I never went into the military, and I wish that I would have. I got lost in the whole drugs and alcohol scene, and it's a big regret. And the other regret I have is I didn't promote often enough and get my way up into, you know, a battalion chief or a district chief position where I could have extended my career. I stayed in the line, you know. And
How is that a regret? That's really interesting. A lot of people that I talk to don't want to promote too fast because they want to stay on the line and boots on the ground.
No, I love that, bro.
Absolutely, yeah. So
I love that, but I didn't put myself in position to do that. You can promote all the way up, and towards the end of my career, I made it up into the captain's position. You know, I ended up dying on a list. Actually, had myself removed from a list. A long story, but You know, as a captain, it's a different. Which is you're in charge of the engine company. You're in charge. It's your station. You got lieutenants on the rescues, which you guys call squads,
Okay.
right? And so, and whoever the captain is at that firehouse, that's the captain on that shift at that station. And he sees over the lieutenant and the entire crew and everything. So, but the next step from there is to battalion. And battalion extends your career because, yeah, you might not be able to get into fires anymore, but I'm still there. I'm in command of the fire now. I'm establishing command and I'm taking care of the guys. And I'm doing the job, but from a different perspective, for a more of a holistic perspective. And anybody that's worked their way up through the ranks now understands what everybody else's job is. And they kind of get an idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
You know who your companies are that train and are squared away. You know the ones that are soft. So you know who to keep an eye on and who needs to be rotated out. You know, that it's a different thing. So in that aspect. But the reason that I didn't do it was because our administration was rather toxic at the time. And my position was, I'll never fucking work for those guys. I'm already working for those guys, you know? Yeah. And as a boss, I could have helped institute change if for nothing else at the station level.
Yeah.
You know? And I missed that boat. I missed that one until it was later on. And it took me 4 years to get my exit strategy together. By that time I was 58. And the problem is that, you know, guys will tell me, bro, you're in great shape. You know, I'm 63 now. They're like, bro, you're in freaking great shape. You outwork most of the guys on the department. I'm an antique car, bro. You can't ride an antique car like a brand new car. You know, I got one speed, go, you know. And you know what's going to happen? I'm going to blow the flux capacitor out. And then when that happens, I'm not going to enjoy all this stuff that I piled up for retirement, sacrificing to pay off a mortgage so I could retire and have my home paid off and do all these other cool things with my wife, who's been patiently waiting, you know?
Yeah.
Now the only people I yell at is my kids, and I'm like, yo, I'm 63, where's my grandkids? Come on, let's go, step it up. And prior to that, it was like trying to keep my daughter in her bedroom until she was 40. I didn't want her dating anybody, you know? But yeah, those are my regrets. But for the most part, man, I've worked with some really cool people. My heroes, man. Every third day, I had to go work with my heroes.
Yeah.
I got to do some insane shit. I got to do some really cool shit. This career has got me introduced to instructors all across the country. I'm flying to San Antonio from here. Instructors that I have met on the road and stuff and know and still teach with here and there. And we're doing a mental health gig there. I'm gonna meet my boy Lee Boy. So there's a band called the Dropkick Murphys, and Lee was he had to retire out of the fire service from PTSD. It was my department that he retired out of, and he loved playing music, but he's a bagpiper, and most of the time you're playing at funerals. I mean, there's the parades, but most of the time it's funerals. And so he ended up hooking up with the Dropkick Murphys.
Really?
Yeah, and he's their bagpiper now.
That is
They actually
awesome.
just made a song called Lee Boy, and it's for him.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it was a total shock and surprise for him. He did the soundtrack, but they didn't do the.
He didn't know.
They didn't
yeah.
vocal anything. They didn't vocalize anything. You know, they went back in and dubbed in all the lyrics and everything after he'd
that's
already
great.
laid the soundtrack down. So they blew him away. It was pretty cool. But I'm going to meet him. You know, I go to Portland. I know brothers and sisters all through California, Texas, New Mexico now. You know, I mean, I'm in the Northeast. You know, New Hampshire, Maine, Boston, Ohio, Indiana, Georgia, all through Florida. It's just crazy, bro.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. This job has been so freaking amazing.